how long you've been a part of ACSP and what your earliest memories of it are.
Oh, I think I've been part of ACSP from mid-60s, so it's about 50 years. I was just looking, I was surprised. It is 50 years. Um, Earliest memory, I think people like Is Tolman and others were leaders at that time. It had some energy. Educator thing was a new thing, and but not energy start to ebb out. By the time 70s, late 70s roll around, it has become basically what some of us thought kind of a department heads meeting. Something like the last one I organized in Cincinnati was 1980. And by that time, people like myself and several others, Michael Teeds, Larry Susskind, Ed McClure, who was the president, were pretty fed up because this was basically became a session where department head came and said, "Oh, aren't they a lot terrible? They're not getting any budgets, and they're planning this and that," and there was no energy at all. So we thought we need to change it. I can slip into some details of when I got involved, if that's any good.
That'd be great.
In 1980, it took place in Cincinnati. Ed McClure was the president, and Michael Teets was the president-elect. And it was second year of Ed's presidency, and vice president, presidents were together. A man named Doug Way was vice president. Midway between his term, he says, "I'm not doing it." He left. He left academia and went to some research or practice. I still vividly recall what happened. Ed McClure was walking down the street, and actually I was on the other side, and he kind of waved at me, calling my name, Jay, come over there, and I did. And he said, "Look, this has happened, and I'm caught by a surprise here. I can nominate somebody, and they'll approve. Would you finish out the vice presidency?" And I said, "Let me think about it a little bit." And I met with him a little later, and I told him, at that time, we had a newsletter which was published by Carl Goldschmidt in Michigan State. And the last one that I said I organized it at Cincinnati. That was the last of what was known as AIP, American Institute of Planners. Just a couple of years before, or the year before, they merged together. And ASPO and AIP merged together. This was very cusp of a big change. And ACSP until then just met with a couple of sessions during AIP conference, which took place in September, and ASPO took place in March. So they together decided that they will have this thing in March. And I proposed to Ed that I'm going to propose an independent conference, the independence conference, and convert the newsletter to a journal. He said, "Fine, who's going to do it?" Oh, I must say, at that time, we were much smaller. And I asked when Ed asked me, what does a vice president do? He said, well, you have two primary responsibilities: publications and the conference. There were no staff or anything at that time. And so he said, you can propose it, but if it passes, you're going to do it. I don't have anything to do. I don't even have a budget for it. I said, no, we'll deliver somehow. Let's propose it. We did, and in the business meeting, it was turned down by minority vote. In journal, they said you will destroy Japa if you do that. And I countered that by saying, no, 60s, we have a lot of new schools, new faculty coming up. They need credentialings. So we need more journal outlet and more conference outlet to do things, particularly the younger faculty member. If you're going to be in a university, you have to have credentials. Well, they didn't like it. And they turned down the conference by saying, well, you are getting 30 to 35 to 50 now. If you do that, because we're all coming at university money, it's not going to work. You'll be lucky to get 25 persons coming in. I said, okay, we'll see about that. But at any rate, they turned both of them down. So primarily, Ed, Michael, Ed was the president, Michael was president-elect. Larry Susskind, who had been a good friend for a long time. Mainly, those of us got together and says, what can we do? And they proposed that we looked at the bylaw. President-elect and past president had one responsibility: review and appraisal, and bylaw was in his or her area. What we found was something like that has to be passed by all the schools and not just those who came to business meeting. So Ed said, okay, I'll take it on myself, on my own, and let's decide to send it out. And we started a campaign. Michael was going to take care of West Coast, Larry was going to take care of East Coast, Ed was going to take the middle area, also myself. And after all of those talk, etc., we sent it out, and it passed, both of them. So Ed said, okay, all yours. And here I found myself no staff, no nothing, no budget. Just before that, Larry had helped the organization by volunteering Rolf Engler, who became the part-time staff member. So I started coordinating, and Rolf confirmed there is no budget. I'm glad my faculty is not here, but I was the dean of the college, and I was also responsible for fundraising, etc. So I had a little money at my disposal with which I can move. So I asked one of my faculty member, very young at that time, assistant professor, recently passed away, David Prosperi, to join me as co-edit a new journal to be called Journal of Planning, Education and Research. I co-edited 2 years, and then the last 4 years, it stayed in Cincinnati for 6 years. Last 4 years, I was managing editor. My responsibility, budget is working, flowing, etc. On conference, I decided to start a new conference, but it was at that time, and I thought it would be a good statement if we did it in Howard University. And we did the first one in Howard University.
What year was that?
1981. And Harry Robinson, who was the dean at Howard, was a friend of mine from Harvard. He's also a Harvard graduate. He said, I'll help you. They were in the process of converting a Howard Johnson to Howard Inn. University has bought it, and we held it there. For those who were afraid of about 35 or 25 attendance, we had 125 people come. And nobody expected it. And it was very good success. Younger people were coming in. And then we also made an emphasis at that time that we'll keep it open to other similar groups, whether it's architects, sociologists, psychologists, or whoever, geographer, historians. We welcome them all to come. Then the next one, again, the conference, a faculty member named Charles Ellison, who's in my faculty, helped me, and a graduate assistant. And so the second one was held in Chicago, 82. And I got Martin Meyerson to come and others who have not come for a long time, talking to them. And we held it in Allerton Hotel. And the attendance by that time was 250. It jumped again. That was very successful. Let's talk about the conference a little bit. The next one took place in San Francisco. I had asked, by that time it was becoming quite a lot of work for me to run the conference. Basically, I was running it. And as sorry, I asked Judith Innes from Berkeley to take that on, and she did. And one of my students, Amy Herman, with whom I worked before, has just become a PhD student over there, and Judith was the advisor. So they ran the next one. My recollection was, Judith would probably tell you better, would be Drake Hotel. By that time, it went up to 450. So that was great. The next one was run totally, if I'm not mistaken, in New York. Peter Salins and Jeannie Birch, both of whom were at Hunter at that time, ran that. By that time, it was about 600. And then please check up. The next one, I think, was at LA, which I asked Trinity Banerjee to run, and they did that. Again, it was 650 or 700 by then. And the next one was at, if I'm not mistaken, in Milwaukee, and Carl Patton was the dean at that time. He ran it. And the next one was in Atlanta. The last two being my last two. From vice president, I became president. So 83 to 85, I was president. 81 to 83, I was vice president. No, just 82. Then the next one was run at Atlanta. David Sawicki, who was incoming president, I believe, ran that one. And by this time, it was reaching close to 1,000. It was, so those who were so afraid to start this thing. I mean, it was not even close. Became highly successful, and a lot of people participated to get it going. But essentially, journal and the conference was at the beginning was run at Cincinnati. I remember Manuel Castells. I don't know if anybody remembers. Great professor, great faculty member from Berkeley.
Yeah, sorry about that. I can adjust it.
I think I should get rid of this stuff.
Yeah. So if you do sway a little bit, we'll kind of still take it.
I'm sorry, I'm two-handed.
Yeah, no problem. It's just kind of pointed directly at your mouth, so when you go
Yeah.
forward, that's
Manuel, we have very high energy going on at that time, and Manuel has said, you know, a lot of people credit you about the journal and the conference, etc. What I would like to say that what we did is created a community, and I thought that was very observant because that's exactly what we did. You'll go to other conference, and I used to get a lot of comment, and I think people still do, that ACSP conference is one of the most vibrant conference of parallel organizations. I've seen, I'll not name any, but people would say that we are bored stiff. It is so refreshing to come to ACSP. And then in my 2 years as a president, I think the best thing I did is to bring into conclusion the PAB. PAB discussions had started, and so I was participating heavily with Israel Stolman, who was still the CEO, executive director of APA, and negotiating, and as well as with AI, which became AICP. So it was a tripartite kind of thing, and we basically said that we need to pin it down now. So I called a conference of all three groups, and we met in Chicago in the airport hotel. I think it was Hilton Hotel. I named it two persons with me, Michael Teets and Larry Susskind, and myself. And AICP named, in those days, professional trusted educators. Some of these educators are, you know, practitioners in their own right. They named Carl Goldschmidt, Margarita McCoy, and a professional named Ray Basie. And APA named the whole thing to be chaired by Michael Brooks. He was the chair of the committee. So we sat there and thrashed out. The main argument we resolved there, it has surfaced again and again, I believe, but from then on, the group must contain the majority academics, basically 2 academics and 1 professional. And we all signed off on that. So finishing of the PAB thing, I feel the presidency time was the most important thing I did. But vice president was definitely creating the journal and the conference.
Yeah. Where do you see ACSP moving in the future?
If I get any sense, and I'm not that involved right now, for years I used to come to executive committee, and now it's governing board, where you get the pulse of kind of what's going on. And I did one at Cincinnati at Professor Connerly's request, Chuck Connerly, my friend, and went very well, I think, went indeed very well. So I got to know more actually what's entail. I did also an administrators conference, I think, in Cincinnati. Based on those things, I would say they should proceed in the direction it's going. And if anything, I would say let's try to get some. Planning is interdisciplinary. Let's try to get other discipline young people to come. They get exposed to us, we get exposed to them. I think panels become richer. So I think that's what I would do.
Lastly, any final thoughts you want to say to people potentially watching the video? Give me just a second to cough. Scratchy throat.
It didn't complete. I missed.
Any final thoughts for people who might be watching the video?
I think SASP is doing a great job. I'm enjoying myself over here. It's fascinating, all the panels that at least I attended. You can pay attention. People are looking at it, attending. So I don't know whether I have any suggestions, but get to it is the best way. I don't know where it stands. At one time, we had created a review and appraisal committee. Maybe that's Committee and Academy, which Bruce Stiftel plays a big role for a long time. I think they would have really much more thoughts to it, but I'm
That's
very excited.
Completely fine, yeah. No, great job.